Hey everybody, this is Brad Dyke saying hi. I'm reaching out to you. Got another little adventurous thing which we're doing right now, and that is we're checking out another piece of classic hardware. It's a little bit older than the 3600 that I just did. It is the Dell Precision 3500. And with everything to be said about this chassis, it is quite a machine. It's a classic mid-tower, and it is designed very streamlined. I also like this design. If it was a tower and it didn't have the distribution like the 3600 had, this would be the right way to do it. Very straightforward, good airflow, ergonomically constructed right, in my opinion. It doesn't scream at you, it just tells you I'm here and I'm ready. Now, this is also a Xeon platform. This is a couple years older version Xeon, and it has what's called a fantail style processor stack. This is a fantail. It does not have a fan behind it. It's just the tail end of it where the fan would potentially mount. But because the heat level of this particular processor isn't really bad, most of us don't worry about it because there's a fan assembly right here that will blow through and bring it through to keep the modicum amount of heat that it does generate fairly under control. Now, the nice thing about this bay, unlike the 3600, is it has 8 bays of up to 8 gigs each, which will give you, a nice little allocation of memory, and it's super cheap. It's like $5 a stick. That's really nice. As you can see here, this is a heat pipe. This is basically 3 copper pairing, unlike the 3600, which has 4. There are 3 here coming off of the copper brick, which is right on the processor. I'm not going to pop this guy off because he's using thermal tape. He's not using paste, and he doesn't need it. And yeah, that's true. The reality of the fact is, if your system doesn't need it, don't do it. You have a very classical Intel chipset here. You don't see that after the production of this. It's usually pretty embedded into the later years. The thing that's really good about this particular design is its slide lock and set. Once you get your slide lock in and you've got everything set up the way you want, and you pull your key out, this is the key right here, pull that guy out, then you can very quickly load up what you want inside it and get yourself in a good place and get your system the way you want it to be, so it's easy to add components to it, drives, sub-bays, and so on. Multimedia could go into there without too much difficulty, and it's very straightforward. Now, this is a classical PC model because it has an isolated standalone power supply, which can be replaced by any standard industry, and it's got the multiple Molex and SATA out there, so you can definitely distribute more power if you want. Hence, it's a very good, more modernable machine. Motherboard is standard industry, so if you look back here, it's basically a AX style chassis. Now, this case is really nice because it can support any of the formats of today's industry. So you could remove the Xeon out, put a new Xeon in, or you can put in like an i7 or an i9 or its equal equivalency, and this machine would be excellent. Why is it excellent? Well, first thing it does is it really does move air. That's an important detail. And it moves air on both sides. Same kind of pattern as before. If you've noticed here, they're showing you that, in its design, air is and flow is very important. And that's absolutely correct. Now, this processor, mind you, is a little warmer, but not hot. It's not like the 1600s and the 2400s and so on. It actually runs pretty cool. Very excellent chassis for doing a PFSense. You can put NIC cards in here, and you can build yourself out a nice little footprint here, which will allow you to do what you want to do. Now, as you can see here, it's running a SSD drive on the ground here, which is a 120 gig allocation, and it also has, I believe, Windows 11 on it. We'll test that out, but let's take a look at the back first. Now, this is an older generation, but it does carry the USB 2.0 standard. has the PS2 output too, which is actually valuable. And here's why this would be a great PFSense platform, because you've got 9-pin and you've got your LPD. That's not bad. You can flip that to a 24 pin if you want, but you can 9-pin out and console in if you really want to. That's really, really valuable. I took the NIC out of this one out, so I'll put a filler bay in there to keep it in good shape. But as you can see, the power supply is well vented, and it's also isolated away from the heat of the CPU area and the RAM. So that's definitely a good heat pump right there, pulling it up and then in through the fan system. Not like the 3600, which has no involvement with the power supply at all. Only thing it's moving from the power supply is a locked-in conduit from the front to the back. The CPU here shares and distributes heat through this because of an older design implementation. You have here also what's called a lock block. It's designed to make easy access, so you have a toolless add-on for your video card so that you can do what you want to do. But it will support GeForce cards. A 1070 would do pretty decently in here. I wouldn't go any farther than that. It's a great starter server, just like the 3600. Not quite as robust, but it's pretty flexible. Seriously, it's really a nice chassis. You could take the motherboard out completely, take it all out, and put in another motherboard in its place. And it's ATX standard compliant, so you'll be able to do that. You just have to work a little bit on the back end here to tool this correctly, so that it will fit correctly, and that's it. You're good to go. It's also prepped for additional workloads and additional fans if you want. It's just, in this particular case, not really a big need, because in this particular motherboard, this is keeping cool pretty well on its own. And right there you see a classical, what I call the classical neodyme style heat sink strategies. They really bring style and fruition. I do like those kinds of heat sinks. Just as an example, what I mean by that, here's another heat sink. It's really cool. You know, it's just really neat to work with these kind of systems where they have fan copper assemblies, and those fan copper assemblies, they only add what they have to add because they're too cheap to give you a total piece of copper. So they only add just enough to be able to offset the heat from the GPU in this case. But the GPU is very small, maybe 256 gigs. I'm sorry, 256 megs, maybe 512. That's it. So this is not a complicated system. So anyways, I just wanted to show this to you. We're going to power it up here in just a second and see how well it does. With the SSD drive on board, it actually boots pretty fast. But we'll check that out in just a minute. Okay, so we got everything hooked up. Now there are a couple of things I don't recommend you do if you get a chassis like this. Like I said, this is an excellent PFSense chassis. You would want this because it could take everything. It's got plenty of flexibility. The slots are really good internally to handle NIC cards, PCI, and AGP. You could put fiber into this, not an issue, and it just wouldn't be a problem whatsoever. So I'm going to power this guy up. You'll see the diagnostic post light is down there on the bottom. The hard drive is connected up, and we have no blinking indicators in the motherboard. So now we're going to turn over here and see if this guy will post. Sometimes these guys don't do so well. Sometimes they do great. But we will find out. Okay, it is posting, so we will go into the system BIOS. This is definitely reading the SSDs pretty effectively. But let's take a look at what we got here. We have our onboard set. We have a Xeon style W3565, 3.2 gigahertz, which is 2 stack, quad CL1, 8, 1, 1 with 256 cache buffer. It is a quad. Date held, so the battery is good. Wait a minute, yeah, there we go. Boot sequence, fine. Drive states, hard drive, RAID, set, drives are showing, correct. There's only one drive on the system right now. Integrated NIC. Now, One thing I will say about this chassis is I don't recommend that you use the NIC, because it most likely is a Broadcom NIC or a 3Com NIC. And if you know anything about those wonderful babies, they're not so great. It's past history experiences. But you've also noticed that there is no USB 3 ready state on this controller. It's a standard USB 2 and 1. Parallel port is active. Parallel port address is in place. Serial port is active. Set to auto state. Miscellaneous devices, front, rear, and all the other interfaces. And video card is set to automatic. Yep. Wait, let me see. Yes, it's the slot selector. So that's important to realize that if you don't put it in the right slot, you're not going to get video output. During this generation of motherboard, they made a lot of noise about hyperthreading and core boosting and turbo boost and several other functionalities that have been recondensed into the same kind of discussion, but in a more, do you have multi-core functioning and so on. Virtualization is active and running. No need to check the security, because it doesn't work anyways. And yes, that is, by the way, a note that this is not a Windows 11 compliant machine. It will not work the way you want it to work, so that's okay. There are ways around that. You can also go to basically go to Linux as well. You can set fast boot up as enabled, right? Okay, so we've basically done all the checks. Now we're just going to go ahead and let it reboot. Starting the timer. It's running pretty fast. Now while that's going, I'm going to go ahead and put my hand in here. Wow. Nothing. Yeah. Very minor warmth. That surprises me. Normally Xeons, if you know anything about Xeons, they like to cycle a lot, so they'll generate a little bit of heat by default. But this one is doing really well. And though of course it is a 3500 series lower end platform in E3 series, it's still pretty doggone good, and it's performing decently. Caching is running good. SSD drive has definitely made a big difference. Apparently we have something in the CD-ROM drive. You can check that out. The ban. 2018. I'll have to check that out. Found that in the drive. It happens. It's not my fault. I didn't do it. So anyways, this environment is pristine and clean. And yes, I would remove the 120 gig drive and put in a much more sizable drive, like a 500 or 1 terabyte. But this is a worthwhile machine. So when I say it's a worthwhile machine, you ask the question, okay, why would I use this machine? Well, first things first, PFSense. Look, download the Linux instance, build your own personal router firewall with VPN components and everything you want. Gobs of space for that functionality and that capacity. As it is, you know, we've got PCI. You can get some super PCI, cheap PCI cards that you can put in here. You can also put in in addition, like a quad brick. You can put a quad brick in. That would be really good. You can also work with the way this is designed so that you get yourself like a $10 PCI network quad block, and then you get yourself a PCI E 2 fiber optic bridge cable, maybe one with a paired set of copper connections as well, or G-bit connections. And what I mean by that is you can have a G-bit kind of card format that can let you do RJ45 copper straight or fiber optic. You know, that's very easy by just simply pulling out the G-bits and plugging them back in. That's very doable here. So you could build a lab separator / home firewall environment, and by doing that you can dedicate a chunk of your bandwidth strictly for your lab, and then everything else is given to the rest of the house for everything like multimedia and so on and so on. This is an excellent machine for that. Another idea is that this machine would be really great for an introduction admin workstation. It's a powerful system. Xeons are powerful because they're designed to do a workload, unlike an I standard processor like an i3, an i5, i7, i9. Now, the fact that it's an ATX compatible, and if you like the case a lot, then you can just gut out the motherboard, put in your own motherboard, and give yourself even more flexibility. Because, you know, that the overall sense is you've got 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7 slots that you can set up for different types of configurations. It's also a semi-decent Proxmox box. A quad hyperthread i7 would outperform this one on a Proxmox environment because it would handle the distributing VPUing of the processors more effectively than this would. But if you had a set instruction where you want to crunch real numbers, you want a database, excellent box for a database. Excellent box. Build your own personal MySQL database. This can do it. Not a problem. Fully 100% compatible with Linux. You can just get off of Microsoft altogether. Whatever you think is best, that would work. That's good. All in all, it's just a really great overall system. Now, the other thing that I found that was interesting about this box is it has a quantum lock-in drive set. Now, this is from the old days. There was this unique type of 5¼ inch style bay drive that could house this assembly here. And it was really interesting because it allowed you to do a lot, and you could put one of those here. And the weird thing about it is the way the pinouts are set in this. But, you know, this is a 3.5-inch drive bay slot, but you could technically put a quantum thin drive in here. The only bad news is they took the IDE controllers off, so they don't exist anymore. And there's no EIDE either. I can see back there in the back. But really, you know, it's a nice little space. So if you wanted to do like a paired set, you can put yourself a SAS controller in here with an external disk array, boot off of an SSD drive, let the SAS do all your databasing, and have it, you know, set up in RAID 1, and you'd be in great shape. The second thing you can do is you can have 2 1TB drives, or 2 2TB drives, one here and one here. And as you can see, it's already set for that already. And you could mirror that and create yourself a small MySQL database model. And it would give you everything I think you'd want to see. Now, this guy right here, this heatsink you see right here, that's a real reason to have a heatsink right there. That's the PCI chipset, or in this case, the PCIe chipset, versus the actual controller Intel chipset, which is right there. But yeah, that guy gets a little warm. Yep, he's warm. And so, but with even that little extra heat, it's still nothing. I mean, this chassis runs cool. And if I was going to do a PFSense router system, this is what I want. I want the firepower, I want the RAM to buffer for my logs, and I want a processor that just can devour when the time comes, because it only gets bad when you start to really log your firewall activity, which is a great exercise. You should try to do that. But it's nice to have a nice, decent processor to be able to do that. And as you can see right there, I'm really impressed at how cool this is staying. That's just not hot at all. That's just mildly warm. That's impressive. So let's go ahead and do the profile here, and I'll show you what it looks like front to back. Okay, so from the front profile, you can see the system here. From the back, you have the release lock, which is up here, and you slide that back, and this whole panel section comes right off, real easy, very easy to work on. You feel very good airflow on a low RPM rate, which is still keeping this in a very comfortable state. The fans are running auto and they're running low, which is very good. You're getting very little heat feedback from any of the power supply and so on. Just in general, it's just a good overall little box. I'm going to go ahead and allow it to finish up its updates. But as you can see here, it's almost done, which is impressive because there was 4 major updates and it's already run through them all. So that's good. So with that being said, this is Brad Dyke. I'm going to let you guys go. I hope you guys had a little fun with this. This is just, I find this kind of stuff and I look at it and I say, you know, this is well thought out. It's not about the manufacturer's name. It's not the brand name. It's the make and model that matters. For every decent or good designed chassis out there, there's 10 that just suck. That are just money savers for them to make money off of you. But you get your hands on some of this hardware, even if they're 5, 6, 7, 8 years old. The things that move can easily be swapped out with replacement fans or, you know, all that kind of stuff. Chump change. The electronics itself is solid. So that's all you have to do is just simply set your environment up, prep it, and you're off and running. Well, like I said, this is Brad Dyke. I'm going to let you guys go. God bless and have a blessed weekend.